The silence in the penthouse on Central Park West was the heavy, suffocating kind. Arthur Grant leaned against the kitchen island, staring at the cold takeout boxes of high-end French cuisine he'd ordered 3 hours ago. The clock on the microwave ticked to 11:30 p.m. On the kitchen counter, his phone vibrated. He swiped the screen. It was a text from Chloe. Still stuck in the boardroom in Boston. Honey, the logistics on the new software launch are a nightmare. I don't think I'll make it back for the New Year's ball. Love you, sleep early. Arthur stared at the screen, his face expressionless. 3 years. 3 years of marriage, and every major holiday ended exactly like this, with an empty house and a text message that read like a corporate memo. Before he could lock his phone, a second message flashed from Marcus, his childhood friend and a managing partner at one of New York's top venture capital firms. Arthur, tell me you're seeing this. I'm so sorry, man. Below the text was a screenshot of an Instagram post. It was from the public account of Owen Vance, Chloe's 24-year-old personal assistant, a kid Arthur had personally approved for hire 6 months ago to lighten Chloe's workload. The photo was taken in front of a sprawling, snow-covered colonial manor in rural Massachusetts. The late afternoon sun cast a golden hue over the estate. Chloe was there, wearing a designer cashmere coat Arthur had bought her for her birthday. Her arm was looped tightly through Owen's, her head resting on his shoulder. She was laughing, a genuine, radiant smile she hadn't shown Arthur in over a year. The caption read, "Taking the boss back to the family roots. Grateful to show her the Vance family estate and the old colonial grounds. New year, new beginnings." At the bottom of the screen, the list of likes was topped by a familiar handle at Chloe_Grant_Vesper. Arthur felt a strange, numbing cold spread from his chest to his fingertips. It wasn't the fiery rage he might have expected. It was a profound, absolute clarity. Chloe had refused to visit Arthur's family in Maine for Christmas, claiming Vespertech's impending product launch required her presence in the city 24 hours a day. Yet, she had found the time to drive 3 hours north to play the doting partner at her assistant's family estate. Arthur unlocked his phone and dialed Chloe's number. It rang 4 times before she picked up. The background noise on her end was dead quiet. No boardroom chatter, no humming servers. Just the faint, distant crackle of a fireplace. "Arthur? Hey." Chloe's voice was hushed, carrying a forced note of exhaustion. "I'm so sorry, babe. I'm literally in the middle of a slide deck right now. Can I call you tomorrow morning?" Arthur looked at the cold food on his counter. "Where are you, Chloe?" "I told you, the Boston office. We're trying to patch the server issues before the markets open on January 2nd. It's absolute chaos here." "Must be a quiet office," Arthur said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I don't hear any of your engineers." There was a brief, sharp pause on the other end of the line. "They're in the conference room next door." "Look, Arthur, I'm really tired and stressed. Don't start this tonight, please." "I saw Owen's post," Arthur said flatly. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. "Arthur." Chloe's voice lost its corporate polish, replaced by a sudden, defensive edge. "It's not what it looks like. Owen's family manor is practically on the way to the Boston office. We stopped by for literally 30 minutes because his parents wanted to meet me. It was a networking thing. His family has deep ties with New England tech investors. You went to his family's private cemetery, Chloe, on New Year's Eve. He was just showing me around. You're overreacting. You're always so paranoid about my career. If you want Vesper Tech to succeed, you need to trust my judgment. I am doing this for us." "For us," Arthur repeated. He felt a bitter laugh bubble up in his throat, but he choked it down. "I funded 90% of Vesper Tech, Chloe. I secured your Series A. I signed the personal guarantees for your office leases in Silicon Alley. I did all of that for us. What did you do this for?" "I don't have to defend my work ethic to you," Chloe snapped, her guilt morphing into anger. "I am the CEO of this company. I am building a legacy. If you can't handle a wife who travels for business, maybe you should have married someone else. I have to go. We'll talk when I get back to the city." She hung up. Arthur stood in the quiet of his penthouse, looking out at the glittering lights of the Manhattan skyline. For 3 years, he had been her quiet benefactor, staying in the shadows while she took the stage as New York's rising tech starlet. He had poured tens of millions of his own capital, money inherited from his family's shipping empire and multiplied through his own hedge fund, into her dream. He picked up his phone and dialed a contact he hadn't called in years. "Edward." Arthur said when the call connected. Are you awake? Edward Vance, no relation to Owen, was Arthur's family attorney, a brutal, 70-year-old corporate shark who had managed the Grant family assets for 4 decades. For you, Arthur, always. Edward's raspy voice came through the speaker. I assume this isn't a social call. It's almost midnight. I need you to pull the plug on Vesper Tech, Arthur said. A pause stretched over the line. The entire portfolio? You have $35 million in direct equity, and you're guaranteeing their primary line of credit with Chase. Pull all of it. Every single cent. Trigger the material adverse change clauses in the funding agreements. Pull the credit guarantees. I want Vesper Tech's accounts frozen by 9 tomorrow morning. Arthur, Edward's voice turned serious, analytical. If we execute a forced, immediate divestment of that scale on a holiday, you're going to take a massive hit on the liquid assets. We're talking about a 30% penalty for breaking the locked-in capital agreements early. You'll lose at least $10 million in arbitrage fees. I don't care about $10 million, Edward, Arthur said, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the Instagram photo of his wife smiling in the snow. I want her to realize that without me, she isn't a tech visionary. She's just an unemployed woman with a mountain of debt. And the marriage? Edward asked. Draft the divorce papers. Irreconcilable differences. No alimony. I want her served the moment she steps foot back in the state of New York. Oh, and Edward, block her access to this building. Remove her name from the residential lease. She doesn't sleep under my roof ever again. Consider it done, Edward replied. I'll have my junior associates work through the night. The banks will receive the withdrawal orders at 8 a.m. Vesper Tech won't survive the afternoon. Thank you, Edward. Happy New Year. Arthur hung up the phone. He walked over to the dining table, picked up the expensive plates of untouched food, and scraped them directly into the trash can. At exactly midnight, as the distant roar of the Times Square crowd echoed faintly through the double-paned glass of his penthouse, Arthur's phone lit up with a generic New Year's text from Vesper Tech's automated PR system. Arthur blocked the number, walked into his master bedroom, and slept better than he had in years. The sun hadn't even cleared the East River when Arthur's phone vibrated against his nightstand. He opened his eyes, fully awake, and reached for the device. It was 6:15 a.m. Edward's name flashed on the screen. It's done, Edward said without preamble. Chase and Citibank processed the wire recalls at 5:45 a.m. The material adverse change clauses were triggered based on the unauthorized asset reallocation your wife signed off on last month. Vesper Tech's primary corporate account is officially frozen. Arthur sat up, throwing the duvet aside. What's the damage to the company? Complete collapse, Edward replied, his tone clinical. Without your credit guarantee, their short-term commercial paper is worthless. The payroll for their 72 employees is due on Friday. As of right now, they have less than $20,000 in liquid cash available to them. By 9 a.m., the automated vendor systems will flag them as delinquent. The dominoes are already falling. Good. Send the divorce papers to her email and via certified mail to the Vesper Tech headquarters. They're already in her inbox, Edward said, along with a formal notice from management that her keycard access to the Central Park West building has been deactivated. I've notified building security. If she shows up, she won't make it past the lobby desk. Thanks, Edward. Keep me updated on the market reaction. Arthur hung up. He walked into the kitchen, made a pot of black coffee, and opened his laptop. He typed out a single text message to Chloe. The dream is over. Check your email. He attached the PDF scan of the filed divorce petition and the bank liquidation notices, hit send, and immediately blocked her number, her email, and all her social media accounts. By 9:30 a.m., the financial world caught wind of the bloodbath. Arthur sat on his leather sofa, the television tuned to Bloomberg Markets. The anchorwoman's voice was sharp. Breaking news in the tech sector this morning. Vesper Tech, the high-flying artificial intelligence startup helmed by CEO Chloe Grant, is facing an unprecedented liquidity crisis. Reports indicate that their primary institutional backer has abruptly pulled all credit guarantees. Vesper Tech's pre-market valuation has plummeted by 85%, with trading halted due to panic selling by minority stakeholders. We are trying to reach Ms. Grant for comment, but her office has issued no statement. Arthur took a sip of his coffee. His phone began to ring incessantly. It wasn't Chloe. She was blocked. but the rest of the world was trying to get through. At 10:15 a.m., the heavy wooden doors of his penthouse shuddered under a violent, rhythmic pounding. Arthur didn't get up. He walked over to the security monitor near the entryway. The camera showed Chloe's parents, Richard and Eleanor, standing in the hallway. Richard's face was purple with rage, his expensive silk tie askew, while Eleanor was frantically pressing the intercom button over and over. Arthur flipped the switch to activate the two-way audio but didn't open the door. "You're making a scene, Richard." "Arthur, open this damn door right now." Richard shouted into the camera, his voice cracking. "What the hell do you think you're doing? Chloe just called us from a gas station outside Hartford. She's hysterical. Her corporate cards are declined, her company phone is cut off, and she says you've ruined her." "I didn't ruin her," Arthur said calmly through the speaker. "I just stopped paying for her lies. The ride is over." Eleanor pushed her husband aside, her face pressed close to the camera lens. "Arthur, honey, please. This is a misunderstanding. Whatever happened between you and Chloe, you can't destroy the company over it. Do you know what this does to us? The lease on our Hamptons house is tied to Vesper Tech's corporate consulting fees. The landlord is already calling Richard." Arthur felt a wave of disgust. For 2 years, he had paid Richard's shell company $50,000 a quarter for strategic consulting just to keep Chloe's family happy. They had smiled to his face, taken his money, and all the while, they had known exactly what Chloe was doing with Owen. They had probably stayed at Owen's family estate themselves. "You should have taught your daughter better corporate governance," Arthur said cold, deadpan, "and better marital ethics. Speak to my attorney, Edward Vance. Don't come back to this building. Arthur, you ungrateful son of a bitch." Richard roared, slamming his fist against the door. "We made you a part of this family. You can't just throw us out on the street because you have a bruised ego." Arthur didn't answer. He reached out and shut off the intercom monitor, plunging the entryway back into silence. He walked back to his bedroom, grabbed his noise-canceling headphones, and put them on. Through the glass window, he could see the gray winter clouds rolling over Central Park, completely indifferent to the storm he had just unleashed. By 2 p.m., the local news vans were lined up outside the Central Park West building. Arthur stood by the window, watching the live feed on his iPad. A field reporter stood in the freezing wind, gesturing toward the entrance. "We are live outside the residence of Arthur Grant, the billionaire investor behind Vesper Tech's sudden collapse. Just moments ago, Chloe Grant's parents, Richard and Eleanor, were spotted being escorted away by building security." In a heated exchange with reporters, Richard Grant claimed his son-in-law was destroying a multi-million-dollar company out of petty jealousy and personal malice. They maintain that Chloe's relationship with her assistant, Owen Vance, is purely professional and that Owen's family was simply hosting a charity-related networking event. Arthur tapped the screen, cutting the feed. He dialed Edward. "Are you watching the news?" Arthur asked. "My junior associates are already pulling the clips," Edward replied. "Richard just crossed the line into actionable defamation. I'm drafting a cease and desist with a formal notice of our intent to file a libel suit by tomorrow morning. We'll freeze whatever personal assets he has left." "Do it," Arthur said, "and make sure the press gets a copy of the filing." Arthur walked into his study. On the mahogany desk sat an old leather box filled with 3 years of shared history. Their marriage certificate, framed photos from their honeymoon in Amalfi, handwritten notes Chloe had left him during their first year when she was still trying to impress him. He took a silver lighter from his pocket, flicked the flame, and dropped it into a metal wastebasket. One by one, he tossed the photos in. The glossy paper curled and blackened, filling the room with the sharp smell of burning chemicals. He dropped the marriage certificate last. It caught fire instantly, turning into gray ash. The front desk intercom buzzed, cutting through the silence. Arthur walked over and picked it up. "Mr. Grant." The doorman's voice was tense. "Mrs. Grant is downstairs in the lobby. She's with Mr. Vance. They bypassed the exterior gate by following a delivery truck. She's demanding to come up, saying her legal name is still on the building registry. I told you this morning, Henry. Her access is revoked. Call the police and have them removed for criminal trespass. She's making a massive scene, sir. The paparazzi are filming everything through the glass doors." "Then let them film," Arthur said flatly. "Don't let her up." Arthur hung up, walked out to the internal balcony, and looked down through the atrium glass into the main lobby 2 floors below. Chloe was there, her hair disheveled from the winter wind, her mascara slightly smudged. She was screaming at the head of security, waving her hands wildly. Behind her stood Owen. The young assistant looked completely stripped of his Instagram confidence. He was pale, clutching a designer duffel bag, his eyes darting anxiously toward the wall of flashing cameras outside the glass doors. "This is my apartment." Chloe's muffled voice echoed up the stairwell. "Arthur, open this door. You can't lock me out of my own home. You're acting like a psychopath." Owen pulled at her sleeve, his voice high and panicked. "Chloe, let's just go. The cops are coming. The press is recording everything. My dad just called me. The family name is all over the financial blogs. This is ruining my career." "Shut up, Owen." Chloe snapped, turning on him with a venom Arthur had never seen before. "Your career? My company is bankrupt. My credit cards are dead. If Arthur doesn't sign the funding restoration, we lose everything. You told me he was too weak to ever walk away. You said you had him under control." Owen yelled back, backing away from her. "You said he was just a trust fund shadow investor who didn't have the guts to make a public move. You didn't tell me he could freeze the Vesper accounts overnight." Arthur watched from above, his face an impenetrable mask. There was no satisfaction in the sight, only a profound sense of validation. The woman he had loved was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered grifter arguing with her accomplice in a public lobby. Two NYPD cruisers pulled up outside, their red and blue lights flashing against the marble walls. Four officers walked into the lobby, speaking sharply to Chloe and Owen. Owen immediately raised his hands, shaking his head and pointing at Chloe, trying to distance himself. Within minutes, the officers escorted them both out into the freezing New York afternoon, right into the waiting crowd of reporters. Arthur walked back into his apartment, closed the door, and let the silence take over again. By the next afternoon, Vesper Tech stock was functionally worthless, delisted from the minor exchanges and frozen on the major ones. The tech blogs were having a field day. Headlines like the fall of the Vesper goddess and CEO caught in Massachusetts snowstorm of her own making dominated the tech feeds. Arthur was pouring a glass of scotch in his study when his secondary, unlisted cell phone rang. It was a number only a handful of people had. He picked it up, but didn't say a word. "Arthur? Arthur, please don't hang up. It's Owen." The voice on the other end was trembling, gasping for air between frantic breaths. All the arrogant charm from his social media profile was entirely gone. "You shouldn't have this number, Owen," Arthur said, his tone icy. "I took it from Chloe's emergency contact list months ago, just in case." "Look, that doesn't matter," Owen stammered, his voice rising in panic. "Arthur, you have to listen to me. I'm ruined. My dad's estate is facing a forensic audit because of the Vesper connection. Chloe lied to me, man. She lied to everyone." "You seem very comfortable in her cashmere coat on New Year's Eve," Arthur replied dryly. "That was her idea. Everything was her idea." Owen cried out, the desperation cracking through his voice. "She told me you were completely checked out. She said you were just an old money ghost who didn't care about the day-to-day. She promised me that if I helped her route the Q3 intellectual property assets to a secondary shell company, she'd divorce you, take 70% of your fund's liquid cash, and make me a managing partner at the new firm." Arthur leaned back against his desk, his expression hardening. "Go on. She's a psycho, Arthur. When the cops kicked us out of the lobby yesterday, she screamed at me in the car for 2 hours, blaming me for the Instagram post. Then she tried to make me sign a retroactive consulting contract to cover up the $3 million cash transfer she authorized to my personal account last month. She's trying to set me up to take the fall for corporate fraud. And why are you telling me this?" "Because I have proof," Owen said, his breath hitching. "I recorded her. Every single time we met at the New England property, every time we discussed the asset transfers in her office. I kept my phone recording in my pocket. I'm not going to jail for her, Arthur. If I send you everything, will you tell your lawyers to drop the secondary civil suit against my family? Please. I'll give you everything you need to lock her away forever." Arthur silenced the call for a brief second, his eyes narrowing. He unmuted the phone. "Send the files to my personal encrypted email. If they are clean, if they are verifiable, I'll instruct Edward to remove your parents' estate from the immediate asset freeze. But you? You deal with the SEC on your own." Yes, absolutely. Sending them right now. Check your inbox in 2 minutes." "Thank you, Arthur." "God, thank you." The line went dead. 90 seconds later, Arthur's laptop chimed. An email with the subject line Vesper internal logs arrived, containing 16 high-fidelity audio files. Arthur clicked the first one. Chloe's unmistakable voice filled the room, sharp and calculating. Arthur won't notice the missing $5 million from the secondary line of credit, Owen. He trusts me implicitly. Once the Delaware Shell Company registers the patent under our names, we file for Chapter 11 on the primary Vesper entity, strip Arthur of his equity control, and leave him holding the bag for the office leases. By next Christmas, he'll be paying me alimony while we run the new platform from Boston. Arthur closed the laptop screen. He didn't feel hurt. He felt an immense, clinical satisfaction. He picked up his phone and called Edward. Edward, I just emailed you a zip file. It's the entire blueprint of Chloe's corporate fraud, straight from her accomplice's pocket. Edward chuckled, a dry, ruthless sound. Well, Arthur, it looks like tomorrow's preliminary court hearing won't be a negotiation at all. It's going to be an execution. The preliminary settlement hearing was conducted over a secure Zoom link at 9 a.m. Arthur sat at his conference table, a cup of coffee next to his laptop. Edward sat to his right, adjusting his reading glasses. On the split screen, Chloe appeared from her lawyer's midtown office. She looked pale, her hair pulled back into a tight, severe ponytail, sitting next to a sharp-faced attorney named Thomas Vance, no relation to Owen. Thomas Vance tapped his microphone. All right, let's get down to it. Mr. Grant, my client is prepared to offer a swift resolution to prevent further damage to both your reputations. We are proposing a confidential restructuring of Vesper Tech. You will restore the $35 million line of credit immediately and inject an additional $50 million in bridge loans to stabilize the stock. In exchange, Mrs. Grant will agree to a post-nuptial agreement guaranteeing you 30% of future intellectual property dividends. Arthur didn't say a word. He didn't even look directly at the camera. Chloe leaned forward, her voice sharp, trying to regain her usual commanding tone. Arthur, stop being absurd. You're destroying a company we built together over a stupid, blown out of proportion misunderstanding. Owen is a kid. He's nothing. If you ruin Vesper, you're cutting off your own nose to spite your face. Sign the bridge loan. Let the lawyers handle the separation quietly, and let's move on. Edward leaned forward, smiling thinly at the camera. Mr. Vance, Mrs. Grant, are you finished? That is our opening position. Yes, Thomas Vance said. Great. Now let's look at reality, Edward said, clicking a button on his keyboard to share his screen. We aren't here to negotiate a corporate bailout. We are here to notify you of the criminal complaints we filed with the Southern District of New York and the SEC at 8 a.m. this morning. Chloe's lawyer frowned. On what grounds? This is a marital dispute. This is grand larceny, corporate espionage, and wire fraud, Edward interrupted. He played the first audio file Owen had sent the night before. Chloe's recorded voice echoed through the Zoom call. Once the Delaware Shell Company registers the patent under our names, we file for Chapter 11 on the primary Vesper entity, strip Arthur of his equity control. Chloe's face drained of color instantly. She half stood from her chair. Where did you get that? That's illegal. That's a private recording. Your accomplice, Owen Vance, handed over 16 separate audio logs in exchange for a limited civil waiver, Edward said, his voice ruthless. We also have the digital trail of the $3 million you routed to his personal account from the corporate tech fund. The SEC has already flagged the Delaware Shell Company. By noon, federal marshals will be executing a search warrant at Vesper's headquarters. Chloe, her lawyer muttered, his face dropping as he looked at her. You told me there were no recordings. He's lying. Arthur set this up? Chloe screamed at the screen, her composure completely shattering. Arthur, you pathetic coward. You think you can lock me up? I made you. You were just a rich kid with a checkbook until I gave you a name in this industry. The call is over, Edward said, terminating the Zoom link. 2 hours later, Arthur arrived at Vesper Tech's headquarters in Silicon Alley. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. The room was dead silent as Arthur walked in, accompanied by Edward and a woman named Audrey Cross, the company's senior director of human resources. As of 11 o'clock today, Chloe Grant has been arrested by federal agents outside her attorney's office, Arthur announced to the room, standing at the head of the table. The board has voted to strip her of her CEO title effective immediately. I am acquiring the remaining shares of Vesper Tech for a symbolic $1, absorbing its debts, and rebranding the entity as Ares Tech. A murmur of panic went through the executives. Mr. Grant, the chief technology officer, stammered. What about the rest of us? Half the management team was brought in by Chloe. Her cousins run the marketing department. Are we all going under? Arthur looked at Audrey. Audrey, take the floor. Audrey stood up, placing a thick manila folder on the table. Over the past 48 hours, I've conducted an internal audit of Chloe's personal hires. For the last 2 years, Chloe's relatives and inner circle have signed off on over $12 million in fake vendor contracts, routing corporate funds directly to her parents' bank accounts. Everyone involved in that paper trail is being terminated today. Criminal referrals have already been signed. She turned to Arthur, handing him a separate, encrypted flash drive. And here is the complete log of the proprietary source code Chloe tried to transfer to her private server last week. I blocked the transfer before it could clear our firewall. Arthur nodded, looking back at the remaining board members. Audrey just saved what's left of this company. As of right now, she is the new executive vice president of Ares Tech. We clean house today. If you worked for Chloe's personal interests, pack your bags. If you work for the company, get back to your desks. We have a launch to fix. By late February, the restructuring of Ares Tech was nearly complete. Under Audrey's aggressive management, the dead weight of Chloe's nepotism had been entirely severed from the payroll. Arthur sat in his new corner office overlooking Madison Avenue when Audrey walked in, dropping a fresh legal binder onto his desk. The federal prosecutors just finalized the grand jury indictment, Audrey said, leaning against the edge of the desk. They aren't playing around, Arthur. They've lined up wire fraud, corporate embezzlement, and identity theft. The paper trail I found on those fake vendor contracts completely sealed it. Arthur flipped through the first few pages. How are her parents handling it? They aren't, Audrey said with a cold laugh. Richard and Eleanor had their bank accounts frozen by the court last Tuesday. Their Hamptons landlord evicted them over the weekend for non-payment. Richard tried to push past security downstairs yesterday morning, begging to speak with you. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I had the building guards trespass him permanently. Arthur closed the binder. What about Owen? Owen's a state witness now, Audrey replied. His lawyers worked out a plea deal with the Southern District. He turned over 40 pages of written confessions detail by detail, in exchange for full restitution, including returning the $1 million sports car and the luxury condo Chloe bought him with your money. The feds are recommending probation instead of prison time. He completely destroyed her defense. 2 weeks later, the trial of the United States versus Chloe Grant came to a swift, unceremonious conclusion in a lower Manhattan federal courtroom. Chloe took a blind plea, realizing that facing a jury with Owen's recordings and Audrey's financial audits was a guaranteed life sentence. Arthur didn't attend the sentencing, but Edward called him from the courthouse steps the moment the judge handed down the verdict. 15 years in a federal penitentiary, Edward reported, his voice flat and professional over the speaker. No parole. The judge cited her systematic abuse of corporate funds and her active attempt to defraud investors as a warning to Silicon Alley. She's being transferred to a facility in upstate New York by tomorrow morning. And Owen? Arthur asked. 5 years of supervised probation, full asset forfeiture, and a lifetime ban from working in the financial or tech sectors. He's essentially a pariah now. Good. It's over then, Arthur said. Not quite, Edward paused. I just got a call from the prison registrar. Chloe's defense attorney says she's refusing to sign the final asset liquidation paperwork unless she sees you face to face. She claims she has information regarding Victor Corp and Titan Group. She says Owen wasn't just an assistant. Arthur frowned, his fingers tapping rhythmically on his desk. Victor Corp was the ruthless billionaire chairman of Titan Group, Arthur's primary institutional competitor in the high-frequency trading market. Set up the visitation for tomorrow morning, Edward. Let's see what she has left to say. The next day, Arthur stood inside the bleak, fluorescent-lit visitors' room of the Federal Detention Center. Chloe sat behind the thick plexiglass partition, wearing a drab orange jumpsuit. Her skin was sallow, her eyes sunken, all traces of her former corporate glamour entirely erased. She picked up the gray plastic phone. Arthur did the same on his side. You look exactly like what you are, Chloe, Arthur said before she could speak. An inmate. Chloe sneered, slamming her hand against the glass. You think you won, Arthur? You think you're the smartest guy in the room because you cleared out my bank accounts? You're an idiot. You always have been. You were just a bank account to me, and you were a target to everyone else. If you brought me here just to vent, I'm leaving, Arthur said, shifting to hang up. Wait, Chloe barked, her voice cracking with sudden desperation. Listen to me. Owen wasn't just some kid I picked up off LinkedIn. He was on Titan Group's payroll before I ever met him. Victor Corp planted him in Vesper Tech. Arthur froze, keeping the receiver to his ear. Keep talking. Victor Corp wanted the proprietary predictive investment models you were funding, Chloe whispered fiercely, her eyes wide. Owen's job was to get close to me, figure out where the blind spots in your fund's security were, and help me transfer the IP out of your control. Victor promised us $50 million under the table once the Delaware Shell Company registered the patents. Owen was a corporate spy, Arthur. Titan Group has all your core data models right now. They're planning to deploy them at the Global Tech Summit next month to crush Ares Tech before you can even launch. Arthur stared at her through the glass, his face perfectly calm, showing none of the shock she expected. Why are you telling me this now, Chloe? Arthur asked quietly. Because Victor abandoned me the second the feds showed up. She hissed. He blocked my lawyers. He hid the Shell Company assets. And he left me to rot in this place. Help me get my sentence reduced to 5 years, Arthur. Tell the prosecutors I cooperated on a major corporate espionage case against Titan Group, and I'll give you the encryption keys to prove Victor's involvement. Arthur looked at his ex-wife for a long moment. Then, he let out a soft, dismissive breath. No, Arthur said. Chloe's eyes widened. What do you mean, no? He's going to destroy your father's empire, Arthur. I don't need your encryption keys, Chloe, and I don't negotiate with felons, Arthur said. He stood up, hung up the phone, and walked out of the room without looking back, leaving her screaming silently against the glass. Arthur didn't take Chloe's deal, but he didn't ignore her information either. Instead of going to the federal prosecutors, he had Edward securely package the raw audio recording of his prison interview with Chloe and anonymously deliver it directly to Victor Corp's personal estate in the Hamptons. 2 days later, the fallout was swift. Victor, notoriously paranoid and fiercely protective of his own empire, panicked. Realizing Owen was a loose end who could tie Titan Group to a federal corporate espionage charge, Victor cut him loose. He orchestrated a fraudulent asset transfer that triggered an immediate violation of Owen's federal probation. By Friday afternoon, Owen's probation was revoked, and he was officially taken into custody to serve a real prison sentence. The sudden move terrified Chloe into absolute silence behind bars. Meanwhile, back at Ares Tech, Arthur called an emergency meeting in the main boardroom. Only Audrey and the senior security team were present. We have a mole left in the development tier, Arthur said, tossing a data log onto the table. Chloe knew too much about our upcoming deployment timeline. Someone else was feeding information to Titan Group. Audrey pulled up the access logs on the main screen. I ran the forensic audit on the core repository, Arthur. There's only one person who had high-level administrative access to the predictive investment models during the transition period. Leo Vance, your old college roommate, and our current technical vice director. Arthur's face remained impassive, though his jaw tightened. Leo. I gave him that position when his own startup failed. He's been accessing the encrypted servers at 3 a.m. from a rotating IP address, Audrey said, tapping her tablet. He's preparing a final data dump. Victor Corp is likely expecting it before the Global Tech Summit next week. Don't block his access, Arthur commanded, his voice cold. Feed him what he wants. But have the engineering team build a Trojan horse into the source code package. Make it look like our complete proprietary trading model, but embed an automated wipe sequence. When Titan Group tries to compile it on their central servers, I want it to burn their entire infrastructure from the inside out. Consider it done, Audrey replied with a sharp smile. The following week, the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center was packed for the annual Global Financial Technology Summit. Victor Corp took the main stage during the morning keynote, looking smug as he stood before hundreds of industry leaders, investors, and media outlets. Titan Group is proud to introduce the future of quantitative trading, Victor announced into his lapel mic, gesturing to the massive digital screen behind him. A system so advanced it will render our competitors obsolete overnight. We are compiling the live data stream right now. Arthur stood at the back of the auditorium, hands in his pockets, watching alongside Audrey. On stage, Victor's lead engineer plugged in the final decryption key, the very file Leo had stolen and delivered the night before. The screen flashed with a loading bar, compiling data matrix. 100%. Then, the graphics glitch flickered. The polished presentation template vanished, replaced by a black terminal window with white text counting down from 10. What is that? Victor muttered, his microphone catching his whispered panic as he turned to his tech team in the wings. Get that off the screen. Switch to the backup presentation. Sir, we can't, the lead engineer shouted from the floor, his hands flying across his keyboard. Our terminal is locked out. The source code just executed a root-level override. It's deleting our directory. The countdown hit 0. The massive screen went completely dark, followed by the emergency lights in the auditorium flickering as Titan Group's local servers short-circuited. Concurrently, news alerts began buzzing on phones throughout the audience. Audrey checked her device and leaned closer to Arthur. The Trojan just mirrored back to Titan's headquarters in Midtown. Their entire central data array is being zeroed out as we speak. Years of proprietary research, client records, financial archives, gone. Before Victor could even step off the stage, four plainclothes FBI agents walked into the auditorium, bypassing the security guards. They walked straight up to the stage and intercepted Victor. Victor Corp, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, computer hacking, and violation of the Economic Espionage Act, the lead agent said, his voice echoing through the shocked room. As they led a pale, hyperventilating Victor away in handcuffs, local law enforcement was simultaneously arresting Leo outside the Ares Tech building. The shock of the public ruin was so absolute that within 48 hours, media reports confirmed Victor Corp had suffered a severe, debilitating stroke in his holding cell, leaving Titan Group to be carved up by bankruptcy lawyers. 3 years later, Ares Tech had completely dominated the North American quantitative sector, growing into a multi-billion-dollar global giant. Arthur, completely removed from the toxic social circles of his past, spent most of his time managing the company's philanthropic foundation. While overseeing a rural education initiative in upstate New York, he met Evelyn, a quiet, sharp-witted mathematics teacher who had zero interest in Wall Street or corporate politics. They married in a private, low-key ceremony on the Maine coast, surrounded only by a few trusted friends like Marcus and Audrey. 2 years after the wedding, Arthur was sitting in his home study when Edward called his personal line. "Arthur, I'm sorry to bother you at home," Edward said. Chloe was released from the federal facility this morning on early medical clemency. Her lawyer reached out. She's broke, living in a halfway house in Queens, and she's begging for a 10-minute meeting. She says she just wants to apologize. Arthur looked out the window. In the backyard, Evelyn was walking through the grass, carrying their toddler son, who was laughing as he pointed at the summer sky. Arthur brought the phone to his ear, his voice entirely devoid of malice, completely at peace. "Tell her lawyer that Arthur Grant died in the winter of 2026, Arthur said quietly. "The only person left here is Evelyn's husband and a father. I don't know who Chloe is." "Understood," Edward said. Arthur hung up the phone, tossed it onto his desk, and walked out into the warm afternoon sun to join his family.